Ethics. You may look at that and say to me, but Jake, why do I need to know about ethics? Why is this important to me? I'm going to be a science major or a business major, not a philosopher. I don't need to worry about ethics. You're wrong. Before we get discussing this, we need to define ethics. So I want somebody to take a crack at defining ethics. Anybody? Jack?
A set of guidelines by which you live your life. No, that's kind of morals.
That's a very important distinction. Let's go off of that. Okay, does anybody else want to try and define ethics real quick? Jack makes a pretty good point in separating ethics from morals. They are, in fact, separated. They're not the same thing. But is anybody else?
About right and wrong?
Kind of. Morals are more about right and wrong. Morals are kind of these guiding principles that we have. So why are ethics important? Well, every once in a while in our lives, we reach a point where our morals can't do us very much good, where they get caught into conflict. We might have competing desires. That's when ethics come into play. My favorite definition of ethics is this. Ethics is a form of inquiry concerned with the processes of finding rational justifications for our actions and the values that we hold come into conflict. So essentially, when our morals fail us, when our morals are tied up in other things, that's when we call upon our ethics. And ethics are important to you because every one of you guys is going to be in a field of work after college that is going to have a set of ethical guidelines. I mean, almost every business does. I don't know if Millsaps has one of the professors. They do? I'm sure that they do. I mean, you're going to see it everywhere you go. So it's important to have a grasp on your sense of ethics. So we're not going to fill these out now, but I want you to take these home and kind of look at these because they're important. I'm asking you questions about where do you want to be when you are out of college? What do you want to do? How do you situate yourself ethically? And what are your high standards? So, all right. I want to get a feel
Jake.
for where we're all standing ethically. So here's my question. Is killing somebody always wrong?
No.
You say no. What do you say?
I say no.
You say no. No? No, okay. What you guys are what we would kind of refer to as situationists. That is, there are some situations where something can be justified that wouldn't necessarily always be justified. Or essentially, there are no black and white truths. So, there's this lovely little chart that my boy Patrick Pleisance, who wrote this great book on ethics, gives us. And he says, in the world of ethics, there are basically 4 categories that everybody falls into. And up here, on this part of the chart, we have relativism. Anybody want to take a shot at relativism? No?
Everything's relative.
Yes, perfect. What you guys just decided, that it's not always bad to murder somebody or kill somebody. On this side, we're going to have idealism. Idealism is more in line with the absolute good and bad of life, that it is always bad to kill someone. So, on this, we're going to have right here, high idealism, high relativism. The situationist. Down here, we're going to have what we call the subjectivist. Up here, high idealism, low relativism. This is what our friends the Puritans would be. Absolutists.
Sociopath.
Those are the people that think killing is wrong all the time. Down here, perhaps the most interesting group, because their whole lives are contradictions. Exceptionalists. Exceptionalists are absolutists who aren't really absolutists, who say, I can be an absolutist, but I can also stop being an absolutist whenever I want to. They're similar to the situationist, but the situationist makes no bones about the fact that they're not an absolutist. The situationist wakes up every day and says, my morals could be completely different from where they were yesterday if the situation calls for it. And the subjectivist, my friends, this is where I fall into. The subjectivist is very similar to the situationist in that they lack absolutist principles. But the subjectivist, if I may define it like this, they base moral judgments on personal feelings about the situation. The difference here between these two is that the situationist would look at the outcome of a given situation and he would say, if the end result is good, if the end result works out for everybody, then all the means are completely justified. That's kind of their code that they live by.
They're between that and utilitarianism.
Well, there are principles of utilitarianism and situationism.
These are all that.
There are certainly principles of that, but utilitarianism in and of itself is a kind of absolutist principle. The greatest good that benefits everybody is the greatest good. Situationism, by this definition, rejects moral rules, asks if the outcome of the situation was best possible given circumstances. So there's this very long questionnaire that's about 30 questions that defines everybody and their ethical guidelines. I was going to print it out and give it to you, but it's really complicated, and it takes about 20 minutes to fill out in and of itself, which would be twice my allotted time. So what I wanted to do is ask you guys, where do you think you stand on this? And is there any questions I can answer about ethics?
Andrew, if you want to go first.
Andrew, what do you think? Where do you think you fall on this chart?
I feel like I fall in the subjective.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, because I'd say I'd base most about the feelings, as you were saying, on whether or not just straight situationist, where as long as the end result was good, then everything that went through was good. Because I don't feel like I agree with everything that gets the end result, even though the end result might be well. I feel like there might be another way that could go around that.
To answer your question, what's the difference between situationism and utilitarianism? The difference would be that utilitarianism kind of values this majority, this 51% mentality. 51% or higher, that's perfect. Situationism sees outcomes that maybe that 49% is important, that they're missing out on. Utilitarianism doesn't always get that. Does that make sense?
So situationalists are not as rational?
It's not that they're not as rational. They would say that rationalizing things is something that's not even always necessary. I mean, there are situations where if you're rationalizing, you're thinking too much and you're losing precious time. But outside of these four categories that are so important, there's one big other part of ethics that we need to talk about, and that is the highest good. The highest good for Immanuel Kant was the value of human life. The highest good for journalists is truth-telling. The highest good for doctors would be something along the lines of preventing death. So what you have to ask yourself is, what is my highest good? What do I absolutely and positively work for? And to give you an example, I'm going to spell out a few of my highest goods. And they are autonomy. Does anybody know what autonomy is?
Functioning without help.
Not necessarily. Anybody else want to take a shot?
To be able to move with your freely without constraint.
You're getting there. Okay. When we think about autonomy, we often think about freedom. We think about this idea of I can go where I want to, do what I want to. But that's not necessarily the case. Autonomy in and of itself is the ability to act how you want to and the way you want to, but with regards to your standing in the world. Okay? So a great example of it, and I'm going to butcher this, so bear with me. But if you put a man in a room, and in the room there are 4 doors, and you say, you can walk through any one of these doors that you want to. Just telling him that is freedom. Now, in so doing, what you're not telling him is that 3 of those doors are locked. He doesn't know that. That is a restriction of autonomy. Autonomy would be, you're free to walk through any of those doors that you want to, but you're not really because 3 of those doors are locked. He's free to do what he wants, try what he wants, but he has a better understanding of his place in the world. Does that make sense? Kind of giving me a crazy look.
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it seems more perceptional, like what the person perceives as his ability to move and
that's
not move.
That's not incorrect. That's not incorrect. But this is the example that my ethics textbook that I had a couple of semesters ago gave us for the distinctions between autonomy and freedom. But autonomy is one of my highest goods. It's for me, it's the ability to get information about where you are in the world, act on that information, and look out for yourself. What? Okay. The other community. Does anybody want to try and define community? It's pretty easy.
Andrew.
You've been particularly quiet today.
I feel like I've answered a fair amount of questions, but community, I guess like what I would say like a neighborhood or something, a group of people working together to reach a common goal.
It's kind of this ritualistic approach. I mean, there's a reason that the basis of this word begins commune, and all these great ritualistic words about people coming together and celebrating. But community is kind of this set of shared beliefs that any group of people can have. I mean, you can have a community these days with the internet. You could have a community with people in Malaga if you wanted to. You just have to find them. Anytime you have shared beliefs, you can form a community. And finally, because I'm such a subjectivist and I don't need any of this, I believe I can make my own morals as I go. But I am guided by one strong rudder, and that is what Clifford Christians calls the ethics. I'm not going to write it down, it's long. The ethics of universal being. And essentially, Clifford Christians writes this 20, 30-page essay on universal being, in which he says that by all things, if nothing else, we should be guided by the value of human life. In every decision we make, we should think about how is this reflecting on people in the world and their struggles and their deaths. So, in that way, I'm making choices where I can say I don't need to be an absolutist, but in fact, I do have an absolutist principle in my highest good. And this is a struggle, but this is really what ethics are all about, because it's when you have these goods that are competing, when you don't really know what to do, you have to look to your ethics to help you get through. So it's complicated, and it's a lifelong struggle, but hopefully it's a worthwhile one. So we should all think about our ethics. I'd encourage you to go home this weekend, maybe take 20 minutes. Think about your highest goods. What's the best for you? Come back and report to me.